Hello, my name is Ron Smith, and my topic today is the last Berger plate. Is it ancient or modern? Mauricio Berger claims these plates were used by Joseph Smith to translate the Book of Mormon. Characters on this last plate are closely related to those on other documents. Sequences of characters can be used to determine the order in which the documents were produced with high certainty. Now, I want to start with a caution. The existence of similar symbols does not by itself say much about the relation between two documents. For example, any two documents written in English are likely to have the symbols "the" occurring on the first page. Here's an example of two unrelated documents. The first was from the first line of the Declaration of Independence, and the second is the first line of the Tale of Two Cities, and you'll notice a almost 40% word and symbol match in these unrelated documents. However, sequences of similar symbols can reveal quite a lot about the relationship between documents. These characters were sold to the Mormon Church in 1980 by Mark Hoffman. He claimed that it was a copy of Book of Mormon characters. Now, everyone agrees that these sequences are virtually identical. The first column of Hoffman and the first column of Berger, and the second column, and the third columns, and the fourth columns, and the fifth columns. Now, Berger doesn't have as many as Hoffman does, but these match in great detail. Clearly, these documents were not made independently. Some argue that the characters appearing on Berger and Hoffman proves that Berger copied them from Hoffman, so the plate must be modern. Others argue that these characters only prove that Hoffman saw an unknown copy of the plate and that systematic differences are consistent with an ancient date of the plate. We will show that the last Berger plate contains a sequence whose origin can clearly be traced to a printing error made in 1844, making an ancient origin virtually impossible. So let's start at the very beginning. These are the 19th century sources and the printing error that I spoke of. This is a picture of Martin Harris as an older man. In our church history, it says this: sometime in the month of February 1828, Mr. Martin Harris came to our place, got the characters which I had drawn off the plates, and started with them to New York City. Harris presented the characters which had been translated with the translation thereof to Professor Anton, a gentleman celebrated for his literary attainments. Professor Anton stated that the translation was correct. He said that they were Egyptian, Chaldaic, Assyriac, and Arabic, and he said that they were the true characters. These are the characters that are traditionally known as the Anton transcript in our church history. The title "Characters," we're told by the handwriting experts, is in John Whitmer's handwriting. This was purchased from the Whitmer family in the 1890s and currently resides in the Community of Christ archives. Some Book of Mormon characters also appeared in a newspaper. This is a church newspaper in New York that ran from 1844 to 1845. It was run by Samuel Brannan and William Smith. Samuel Brannan is of the California Gold Rush fame, and William Smith was Joseph Smith's brother. On December 21st, 1844, they printed an article which had these characters. And when they're rotated by 90 degrees, you can see that the prophet is a printed copy of the first three rows of Whitmer. When I say it's a printed copy, here's what I mean. The characters aren't exactly the same. You'll see some differences. But the sequence is clearly the same. And this goes all the way across the whole line. Again, there are differences in individual ones, in individual characters, but the sequence is clearly the same. There was an advertisement for the Book of Mormon. This was a poster or broadside that was printed by the prophet in 1844 as well. And the original was gold lettering on black paper. Here's a modern recolored version showing the 3 lines of characters that it had. And I want you to remember that every page printed in 1844 was typeset by hand. Artwork was done by an engraver who transferred the art backwards onto a copper or wood block and carved out the excess. The photographic process for printing hadn't been invented yet. It turns out that the Stick of Joseph and the prophet artwork are character by character exactly the same, except for one small detail. To see that, we'll put the first line of the Stick of Joseph on top of the characters on the prophet, and you can see that they're character for character the same. The second line, character for character the same. The third line, the first half of it is character for character the same, and the last one is different. The printer rotated the last block 180 degrees, and so this is a printing error. I believe the Stick of Joseph and the prophet characters were printed using the exact same print blocks, but the final Stick of Joseph characters are upside down and backwards. This is Professor Anthon, who Martin Harris took his characters to, and in 1834, Professor Anthon wrote a letter to E.D. Howe, and here's how he described the characters that Martin Harris brought. This paper consisted of all kinds of crooked characters disposed in columns, and had evidently been prepared by some person who had before him at the time a book containing various alphabets, Greek and Hebrew letters, crosses, and flourishes. Roman letters, inverted or placed sideways, were arranged and placed in perpendicular columns, and the whole ended in a rude delineation of a circle, divided into various compartments decked with various strange marks, and evidently copied after the Mexican calendar given by Humboldt. These are the Hoffman characters, and it looks like Anthon's description. The characters are arranged in columns, and it ends in a circle. This was what was sold to the Mormon Church in 1980 by Mark Hoffman. It's known to have been produced by Hoffman. There's a reference there to the book Salamander, which is a wonderful book about Mark Hoffman and the murders that he committed and the forgeries that he did. The ink was dated after 1900, and there were 3 other tests for forgeries that turned out positive on this particular document. We also have Hoffman's confession, where he gives a detailed account of both how and why he made the characters the way he did here. This is a picture of Mark Hoffman, and Mr. Stott was the prosecutor, and here's some of the questions and answers that were given. Mr. Stott, let's go to the Anthon transcript. Can you tell us how it was that you came up with this idea? Answer, I read a description of the transcript which Charles Anthon gave, which does not match, obviously, the known character page which the RLDS Church has. What was your thinking from there? Answer, well, I probably can't be lucky enough to find it, so why can't I make it? Question, you wanted to make some changes from the characters that were in the Whitmer transcript. What was your idea, and why did you go about it that way? Answer, I wanted the chronology to appear that the Whitmer transcript came from this copy. I made it appear as though the broadside version and the copy in the newspaper called The Prophet came from another copy that is unknown, which originated from my copy. I tried to make it so that the Whitmer transcript came directly from my copy as far as the detailed changes or whatever. So here you see some characters that are slightly different in Whitmer and the Stick of Joseph, and when Hoffman put them on his document, he put the bottom closed loop like Whitmer, and the top was kind of ambiguous. It could be either one. How did you go about deciding what to do as far as making changes in each specific character? Answer, in some characters I added details which did not appear in the others. That's the way that they trace the chronology of that sort of thing. So here we have a closed loop on this T-shaped character, and neither Whitmer nor the Stick of Joseph has a closed loop. And we also have a rounded base, which neither of those have. And he says he put them in there so that they would both look like copies of his, because his has more detail. Did you add some of the characters or did you take apart some of the characters? Answer, I did both. I believe in the Hoffman version it's drawn with more care and does not look like it was taken from the Whitmer transcript, but rather the Whitmer was taken from it because it has more details, the way the characters are grouped. Here we see four characters in Whitmer and the Stick of Joseph that aren't that far apart, but this is the way that Hoffman renders them. He takes the 7 and he rotates that 180 degrees. He leaves the caret as a caret. He puts the little T down below, and he puts the filled square, and that is the way that he draws these four characters on his document. Here's another example. These two characters are a little bit different in Whitmer and the Stick of Joseph. He takes the top V from the Whitmer, he takes the coil and he rotates it by 180 degrees. He takes the upside down U from the Stick of Joseph and makes that character out of it. Another example, these two sequences are a little bit different in Whitmer and Stick of Joseph. He takes the 9 and he puts it on the left. He puts the circle next to it. He puts the 6, adds some symmetry, and he has this little tiny flower. This example is from the 4th row, so it's not in the Stick of Joseph, but we have the closed paren curve, and we have the open paren curve down below. We have this angle. Hoffman was really careful about angles. I didn't change that angle at all. It's exactly the same. And we have the 3 and the dot, and this is the way that Hoffman renders that sequence. As our final example, we take one from the Stick of Joseph. This is from the upside down, the rotated characters, and he takes the first 2 lines and separates them. Then he takes the next 2 characters and they have some parallel lines. He leaves them parallel, rotates them. He leaves them in the same comparative lengths as they were to start with. And then the final one he leaves parallel. Question, did you use all of the characters in the Whitmer, the broadside, or what? Do you remember? Answer, I believe that all the characters on the Whitmer document have a corresponding character on the Hoffman transcript. The broadside and the newspaper versions do not have as many characters. They are an abridged version. So on the left we have the Whitmer. On the right we have Hoffman. And we'll see that some characters are modified, but the sequences remain the same. And given the combination of characters that we've seen, every character of row 1 through 4 is easily identified. Row 5 is a little bit more tricky because he splits it into 3 pieces, and he puts Hoffman put a double column in his column 5, and the last little piece is down below in the circular area. It's a little bit hard to see right here. But some characters on the last rows of Whitmer are indistinct on Hoffman, but he smashes them all in there and gets them into this area. Virtually every sequence on Whitmer can be identified on Hoffman. Question, the zodiac, the circular figure, where did that come from? Answer, my imagination. Question, how about your decision to place inside the circle the characters? What was your reasoning there? Answer, well, I had a bunch of characters left over from the Whitmer transcript I tried to get in, and I crammed them in there. The inner circle is divided into 4 sections horizontally. There were 3 horizontal lines. You can see them. Do you try to keep the characters in the circle in some kind of order? Yes, they're in the same basic sequence as the Whitmer transcript. with the last character on the Whitmer transcript being in the horizontal rectangle at the bottom of the circle. It looks something like an upside-down V. Question, do you remember, are there any characters that occur maybe in the placard that don't in the Whitmer or vice versa? Answer, I may have added a character or two. Again, it would have been to make the Hoffman transcript look more complete or earlier in the sequence. On the Hoffman document at the far right, the portion that corresponds to Whitmer is outlined in red. The final characters at the bottom of Hoffman's first column come from the right end of the stick of Joseph. The rest of the Hoffman characters come from the rotated sequence in the stick of Joseph. Here we see the conglomerate character. This next character is split into two pieces in Hoffman. Notice the little tail on the I-beam and the superscript H in both documents. The thick horizontal line in Hoffman is the crease in the paper. These characters also have many similar details. There are 9 parallel strokes. The bar over the 9 strokes has an upturn on the right edge, and the horizontal tally stroke through the rightmost 5 vertical strokes can be seen in Hoffman if you look very carefully. This character I call double ears. It appears several times in the rest of the document as well. The stick of Joseph ends with a 6. Hoffman's ending includes an extra horizontal dash after the 6. So Mark Hoffman designed his document to look like Anthon's description. He used every Whitmer character, although he altered many. He preserved the basic sequences of Whitmer, and he employed extra sequences from the stick of Joseph. His purpose was to convince experts that his document was the real Anthon transcript, that Whitmer was copied directly, and that the prophet in the stick of Joseph descended from Hoffman. With that background, we're now ready to look at the critical sequence. The critical character sequence first appears on the far right of the 3rd row of Whitmer. Here's the version as it looked in the prophet, and it was turned over, rotated, and here's the version that came out in the stick of Joseph as a printer's error. Here's Hoffman's version of the row 3 of Whitmer, and here's his version of the in row 5, his version of the stick of Joseph. This is Berger's version of the same characters in Hoffman, and this is his version of the same characters in the printing error. So let me summarize. Here's the critical character sequence as it appears in Whitmer. Hoffman made this rendition of it. Here's Hoffman's rendition of the printing error, and both of those sequences turn up in Berger. So is the last Berger plate ancient or modern? Hoffman includes a version of the critical sequence, maintaining the order of the characters in order to make it appear that Whitmer is a direct copy. Hoffman includes a second version of the same sequence with upside-down characters and a backward order due to a printer's error in order to make it appear that the stick of Joseph is a descendant of Hoffman. The fact that the printer's error shows up on Berger indicates that Berger was not engraved prior to 1844. The fact that Hoffman contains so many more characters than Berger shows that Hoffman is not just a copy of an unknown copy of Berger. The fact that both sequences in Berger exhibit virtually identical shapes, order, and general placement on the page as Hoffman is strong evidence that the Berger plate is indeed a copy of Hoffman and therefore was engraved after 1980. Here we see the original sequence. Here's the way they look, the two versions in Hoffman. And here are the two versions in Berger. I thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. God bless.